Another draft physics video and such. Anyway, so this back on the interferometer. So this time I did use just a plain piece of glass, a glass slide. Just a single piece, not a double piece, just a single one, no film, no anything. And it works perfect as a beam splitter, so I don't understand this whole complexity about somehow being able to split light when a plain piece of glass does it just fine, placed at a 45-degree angle. And so I had everything perfectly lined up this time, and I didn't get any interference pattern. I got a pattern, but no sign that there was two beams interfering with each other. Just a single beam creating a pattern. So it seems clear to me that this is all about the internal reflection between the surfaces of the glass. So I would argue that beam splitters are traditionally made of something that has like the usual cube style, show you that close, the cube style, so it's two of these glued together. So the cube style beam splitter is made by putting a thin film between the two surfaces and then gluing them together. And it's that film, I would argue, is where the internal reflections are taking place, and that's creating the pattern. And so I guess the next step is to try different thicknesses of glass to see how much difference you get in terms of how sensitive, let's say, the pattern is to movement, and how much how thick the bars are, I suppose. So that'll probably be some next step, is to I'll try to find some glass I can break, that's of different thicknesses around here somewhere, or something like that. I guess, I do have some. I do have some broken tablets, and they have a really thin layer of glass, so maybe I can get a piece of that and try that. And see if I can get the same exact results, or what the change will be. So anyway, I'll play some of this just so you can see it. It's a very clear pattern. The beams seem quite equal in brightness, so it does seem like it's really half the light is going one direction, half the light's going the other. Perfectly legitimate experiment in many ways. You don't need any sound here, I don't think. It does get in the way. So it's a pretty good pattern, right? I mean, you can't complain about that. So the interesting thing, you can see the outline over there, the outline of the slide, and the dark spot is because it was actually a used slide, but anyway, doesn't really matter. But you can see the outline of the glass, and there's actually a pattern, a second pattern that's in the glass. So the glass has a pattern in it, and it's sort of projecting onto the paper. So when I block the main source of this light, which is the bar going across, say if the emitters this way, the one you're looking at is the cross section one, the one that reflects, goes back and goes out this way. And I'll be blocking this path just to point out how it doesn't change the pattern any, and such. But yeah, very good pattern. So I'm putting my hand there in front, blocking the other beam, just to point out how it just changes the intensity of the center. It doesn't do anything to the pattern at all. Yeah, you can probably see that. I have to make sure, I guess. Yeah, you can see that. Color's not exactly right, but close enough. Alright, so now I've blocked the perpendicular beam, and you can see the pattern is there's a pattern on the glass that's still projecting, and that's the one coming from the beam that went straight through the glass and came back, and it's reflecting some portion back the other way. But you can see it's only a portion. It's a very weak projection, and I don't have, it's hard to explain exactly why it's so weak. You can see that it's strong enough in the glass, but it doesn't have any, doesn't go beyond the piece of glass. So it's like it's being projected on the glass at an angle, and the glass is projecting it this way. So it's being shot this way, and you're seeing an image of it just barely going the other way. So this is essentially the pattern that ends up on the door, is this pattern. It's just an image of the pattern that ends up going to the door, which I'll show eventually. So here you can sort of, let's see if I can catch it at the right moment here. Come on, take it away again. Ooh. You can sort of see that the two patterns don't match. They're not the same thickness in the same location. So they're not exactly the same, and that would make sense because the distances aren't the same. The distance this way to the distance this way aren't the same. So they have a different thickness. It makes sense that they would. No, it's just a weird, it's weird. The whole thing is quite strange. I mean, I don't know what to make of it exactly. Like I said, this one's really well lined up, and I couldn't make it create a different pattern when I had both beams shining. So when both beams are supposed to be interfering, it doesn't change the pattern anymore. The one beam has all the pattern, the other beam doesn't seem to add anything to it. And you'll see that here. I think I moved the can just to show how the one pattern isn't connected to the other pattern at all. Alright, so that's the one on the door. So that's the one that's going straight through and then straight back through. So it's a through and through. It doesn't reflect, it just goes straight through the beam splitter and then straight back through the beam splitter and past the laser. So the laser is the shadow in the middle. If you can see that, yeah, you can see enough of it. Not completely obscured. So, and it doesn't seem to have much, the other pattern doesn't create much of a reflection going back this way. So the perpendicular pattern doesn't seem to create much of anything coming back. It all seems to go the one way and not much comes back the other way. I mean, it's a very weak halo. You can see barely a little halo around the laser beam when it's blocked, but that was it. Back to this pattern. Now I'm going to move the can, probably. If I recall, these two little lights are just reflections off the glass on the camera, so they're not relevant to anything. You can see very strong pattern. Go ahead, get to it. It's still in the image, yes, it's close enough. Barely in the image. There, it's a little better. So I'm still just blocking it with my finger just to see if I block it a little bit, whether it makes a difference, just to see if I can find some kind of subtle differences, and I just couldn't find any. And we're getting off screen there. Come on, get back over. Come on, don't force me to have to play around with this thing much. Well, might as well just slide it over for the sake of science. We'll just say, fuck you, Gary. Get out of the image. Alright, continuing. There it goes. See, now I'm moving it. You should be able to see that. Let me hope, yes, almost. There it goes. That's better, Gary. Center it in the camera. Try to center it. Now move it again, idiot. Come on. There you go. Well, you can barely see that, but I'm moving it. It's a little, one's higher than the other. And you can see they both have a pattern, but one pattern is stronger than the other pattern. See if I can capture any of that. See if you can see any of that. And you can see it. But it's a little distorted. It's changed the aspect ratio of the video. Alright, so we'll do that over again a little bit with that. See if we can stop it at the right moment. Alright, so there's the two beams pulled apart from each other, and you can sort of see that there's two patterns. But they really, when they overlap, they don't do anything special or interesting. There, you can smell. You almost see it there. Let's see if I can get a better spot. Yeah. See, that's a very weak pattern. So that's the one pattern is really weak. I don't know if you can even see it. Yeah, well, there's something there. So you can see one pattern is kind of weak, and the other one's a little stronger in terms of a pattern. Yeah. So that's the perpendicular one. The other one's the reflection back. But you can see the beams seem to be of equal brightness. So even though the patterns are a bit different, the beams seem to be equally strong. But you can see they're quite well overlapped. I mean, they're right on top of each other. And nothing amazing happens when they are. I think that's about it. Slide that back over. Alright, so the point is, so what to conclude? I mean, what does this mean for this experiment? So there's two questions. The first question is, do people really think this would work with single photons? Do they think it's actually single photons who are interfering with each other to create the pattern? So that's a significant issue. Quantum mechanics says every single photon is interfering with itself, not with each other, because there's no evidence that individual photons, different photons, create interference patterns. The argument is that you can send single photons into any one of these interference experiments, and these single photons will interfere with themselves. And so that's one question that seems, that doesn't make any sense. But anyway, so let's go. So the next step is to say, well, if photons are actually interfering with each other, clearly the ones coming from one reflection and the two split beams, when they're combined, don't seem to be doing anything especially special. They don't seem to be creating some sort of new mixture of the two patterns or some kind of new pattern. It seems to be just that they each are creating a ringed pattern without having to do any interference per se. And I would argue that the rings are just a reflection of all those little internal reflections. So in the entire, when the beam goes through the piece of glass, it has a thickness and lots of photons are going through. And each one of those photons is reflecting between the two layers of glass, creating internal reflections. Not each of the photons. 50% of the photons, let's say, go through a reflecting process. Or 40%, whatever the number is. And some of them pop out on the first reflection, some of them pop out in the second, some of them pop out on the fifth, some of them pop out in the seventh. That's the it's not random, but that's the thing happening based on a probability. So there's a certain probability with each reflection of the photon being released. Either way, it's bouncing, going through the one surface or going through the other surface. And it's that probability, which would be like 4% each on each reflection. There's a 4% chance on each reflection that the photon exits, and it's randomized. So you could have 20 or 30 reflections and then it leaves, or you could have 10 reflections, or you could have just 2, or you could have 1. And that's what's creating the rings. So the rings are just evidence of the number of internal reflections that the photons, some are experiencing 20 internal reflections, or 30, some are experiencing just 1. So they're brighter in the center and get dimmer on the outside. And the angle gets smaller the more reflections there are for some reason, which I'm not entirely sure of. because obviously the rings get thinner as you go out. So I probably should leave the video on the ringed pattern. So anyway, just adding this to the collection of evidence that the story, the explanation provided by all the people who believe in these interferometers implies that this shouldn't even happen. Okay, that you need something called a beam splitter, like a half silver piece of mirror or something, to even have any hope of doing this, creating this pattern. And clearly, you know, you can create it with just a piece of glass. So I think that's indication that we haven't been told the whole story, that the science is kind of weak and thin, and they haven't really tested this theory of interferometer. They haven't examined it deeply enough to find out what the real working mechanism is, why there's a pattern, what's creating it, what's the cause. And this indicates a very simple cause of just light reflecting between the two layers of glass. And you don't need a complex theory of interference to explain the patterns. Now, the reason why interferometers are sensitive to distance is, I think, the argument I've made before about the fact that the light diverges with distance. So it magnifies movement, because a little bit of change in the distance creates a change in how wide the pattern gets, which means that as you're magnifying it, you can measure small changes because you're magnifying the ring pattern. So this was about a 3-foot distance between the beam splitter and the mirrors. 3 foot one way, 2 feet the other way, and such. So, you know, I'm just saying to these people who think that they've got the right story and everything's been explained, I don't really think it has. And I think a lot of conclusions have been jumped to. It looks like an interference pattern, therefore it is, when there might be a very different explanation for what's physically causing the pattern. There, that's all I can say. Maybe I will discover more information to cast even more doubt on the explanation provided, which is somehow light photons is interfering with photons somewhere in here. It doesn't look like there's any evidence of that happening. Alright, so the other thing, I did want to respond to a comment, I suppose. I don't know if I want to. Guess I will, since I'm here. So I have to change this to some other window. I assume this is the right window. I assume. Yeah, it is. Alright. Yeah, it's close enough to readable, I think. Move that over a little, maybe. So there's this Pamela Kondik. Okay, yeah, not a great name. I don't even know if I said anything about the not a great name. But anyway, a very hostile overreaction. So I suppose I can read her original comment that I basically said, yeah, whatever, this sounds like, you know, poetry or something. Not interested. Alright, so when we witness great deep thinkers argue their point of view, we are just being blessed by the universe. So apparently she doesn't, you know, she doesn't feel blessed anymore. So somehow it doesn't have anything to do with how deep my thoughts were, or the point of view, or any of that shit. None of that shit mattered, because somehow if I insult her in some way, then none of that stuff actually took place. So it's one of these people who rewrite history based on whether you bow to them properly. You know. Like ancient philosophers, you hold us a captive audience like the ancient Greeks. See, I mean, even that whole... Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't find this kind of conversation useful or charming. I mean, yes, maybe it's flattering, but that's not what I'm looking for. Okay, not even close. I really appreciate your arguments. Based on what? See, apparently you don't appreciate them, because all of a sudden now you're going to say my arguments are shit, because one of my arguments was I don't like poetry much. And brilliance. So it was brilliance when you wrote this, and all of a sudden now it's not brilliance anymore. Your foe, and I don't even like this part, my foe is an asshole. And instead you're saying your foe is a genius. No, he's an asshole in his own right. Well, I'm not making that concession. I think I'm right, and I think they're idiots. That's my truth. So you're just arguing with me here, in my opinion. That's an argument. Saying my foes are something other than lying scum is, in my opinion, being argumentative, because all they've demonstrated is an ability to lie and be scummy. But his genius shines differently than yours. So again, they're genius at what? Lying and being deceptive and dishonest and cheating the argument wherever they can. That's not a kind of genius. That's a kind of asshole. So maybe I did read this and I just hated that sentence so much that I had no use for this comment. Thank you always for sharing your arguments. Well, I'm really not doing it for that purpose. I'm not doing it to charm somebody. I'm trying to get my client out of jail. I'm trying to get the truth out of the jail that these religious kooks have thrown it into. And proofs and critical thinking and deep-seated logic. So I had all that stuff before, but not no more. So then she added a PS. When I said foe, I meant you're always foe. What an always foe is. This guy I don't even know. Sorry for the confusion. What do you mean my always foe? I don't even know what that means. Alright, so anyway, so then I didn't even be as harsh as I just was to this comment. I just fluffed over it and said, yeah, whatever. And this is the insane overreaction. I don't really care where you go with this comment, because I've unsubbed, gone through your videos and thumbed a bunch down. So this is a rational reaction. So somebody paints a painting. You say, oh, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's fantastic. And then they say, hey lady, you got a fat ass. All of a sudden the painting's a piece of shit. You don't see how that's the reaction of a child? Anyway, then I got bored, but I'll thumb down every effing video you ever made, you dumb cunt. I'll never see your stupid response, so blast away, you shriveling a-hole. And again, this, I didn't go anywhere near calling her a cunt or saying you're a stupid fuck or any of that shit. I made a comment which was complimentary. Well, maybe you think so. See, I hate religion, I hate poetry, and I hate saying something like, oh, the assholes lying about you are geniuses. So, to me, it's not a compliment. And even if it was a compliment, again, I just couldn't give a rat's ass. I'm not doing this to get compliments. What I'm doing this for is to hear arguments. And you could say something like, well, gee, your last video seems you made some points that no one's refuting, and it seems like if they're right, they should be able to provide evidence. And that would be a complimentary comment, in my opinion. But this much, I don't need shit about, well, you have lovely eyes. I'm just not interested. Not expecting any response. I wasn't opening a conversation. So you type a whole bunch of poetry about brilliance and how wonderful it is to see somebody being philosophical and having blah 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 blah. You do all that mush and you don't expect anybody to react. Oh, Or criticizing your obvious flaws. Well, if they're obvious and they're all over the place, then go ahead and criticize them. If my fat ass is in the way, then go ahead and point out, hey Gary, your fat ass is in the way. Just being nice. I don't need it. I don't have any use for it. Where do I spread the just being nice? What does it do? Does it go good with cookies? Maybe this 58-year-old, I don't know how that's relevant, but I'm also 58. University educated, science. Science is a kind of a vague thing, isn't it? Like, what was the science? you know, unicorn research. I don't know. University, Western Ontario, maybe. You know, Ontario. I guess that would be in Ontario. I don't know what UWO is. I guess we're all supposed to know that. That's the biggie in Canada. I'm really impressed with all the big universities in Canada. No, I'm really not. Name me somebody from that university that was really slick. Anyway, just smoked a bowl. Okay, so you're some sort of scientist who thinks smoking bowls is like some kind of thing you talk about. And, oh yeah, that's how I do my science. You know, I watch science videos while stoned, and I'm just saying, for anybody who gives a shit about anything real in the world, they really don't want to hear about what you know. I mean, your recreational party drug. What's the point? I mean, how is it relevant? And how do you think that anybody who gives a real shit about being serious thinks, oh yeah, I smoke bowls and do great science? No, you draw cartoons. I've smoked a lot of pot, I know. It doesn't make you brilliant. It makes you stupid, in truth. And was watching some of your discourses. Was impressed. Oh, you're not anymore, though. See, I mean, you're just pointing out how your own judgment can't be trusted. Because, 15 hours ago you were impressed, and then 15 hours later you're not impressed. See, you're called what's called wishy-washy. Your opinion doesn't mean anything because apparently your judgment is completely upside down. One minute you think it's hot, the next minute you think it's cold. See, that's the definition of somebody whose opinion isn't useful for anything. So now you're just making my whole critique of your comment even more valid, because you're just demonstrating how my intuition that, well, that's just mush, slide it off the table, thank you, that my intuition was perfectly correct, because you're a wishy-washy. You change your mind in 15 hours and decide to spread some good energy. Again, you don't know me very well. There's no good energy. That's religion. That would be waves, not particles, obviously. See, to me, that would be poo, not whatever, food. Yeah, obviously. I just don't have any use for this waves of good energy shit. Not going to be an appealing conversation for me to engage in. Well, a couple other dumb fucks made some stupid ass comments. Well, that's my fault. Oh, sorry. Yes, they made fun of your name. Okay, I didn't do that. So, what's this fucking bullshit for? I didn't go into defense or attack mode. Well, you did to me, so you should have attacked them. I don't know why you're attacking me. I didn't do any of that shit. Because they weren't even invited. People are invited. It says comments, and you click a button and you comment. You did it. I didn't invite your comment either, by that standard. My last name came to me as a natural phenomenon of marriage. Well, if you think there's something natural about marriage, and if you think there's something natural about the man naming the woman, there's nothing natural about that. That's called chauvinism, actually. So to that F-tard, Google it, dumbass. You should Google condick. Yes, you can probably Google any perverse arrangement of letters and somebody will have that asshole name. There's probably somebody with the name asshole. But to be publicly kicked in the face, I don't know, is that what I did? Did I kick her in the face? Did anybody see that happen? For sharing a nice thought, for sharing mush, basically saying to somebody who's a vegetarian, here's a big pile of steak. I mean, I can't, if you've seen any of my videos, I'm just not the kind of person you blow smoke up the ass of. It just doesn't work on me. Well, I see you for what you really are. So again, you were really stupid in your first assessment, and now you've got it right. 15 hours later. So again, you're just not a very reliable witness, are you? You really are. So go die in a gutter, you waste of skin. So again, what's the there's no logic here at all. I don't mind dying in the gutter and all that kind of crap, but I'm just saying say it because my physics is garbage, but not because you got hurt feelings. I mean, you see how illogical this is? You're making something personal that, number one, wasn't personal, and then you're letting the personal attitude completely corrupt what is supposed to be some rational analysis by someone who claims to be university educated in science, and here you are making some petty bullshit commentary that somehow my science is garbage because my attitude sucks. I mean, it's just stupid. P.S. You don't even know what year it is. Well, I could tell you that I really couldn't give a shit. There hasn't been a good year for quite a while, so acknowledging the new ones doesn't mean much to me. But I mean, that's just kind of right. I mean, how many people have signed a check, after the new year with the wrong year on it? I mean, come on. Petty. So again, did you go to university to figure out how to be this fucking petty? To make these kind of fallacious arguments? You had to go to college to learn how to be a fallacious, petty bitch? Whatever. Sounds dirty, but whatever. So, anyway, yes. Fuck off, Pamela. Fine. Go ahead. Thumb down the videos. Be a petty asshole. It's only going to make you an asshole. It doesn't change who I am. It demonstrates who you are. You reveal your true colors, which is, shit brown. Okay. And Michael Falwell, I don't think much of this comment either. Hi Gary, speaking bullets aside for a moment, what that is, the MM experiment was devised to simply measure detect motion. It really wasn't. I mean, they were passionate about discovering the ether. It was about ether. It wasn't about detecting motion. So again, I don't know why you people keep rewriting history, but whatever. By reasoning, we attempt to measure this motion by inputting some relational known constraints into the equation. It's about an equation that said you observe light in the hope that it will yield some significant difference to be measurable by. So again, this notion that that you have any hope of reflecting light by different rules, in terms of path length, than the rules that you're changing in the other direction. But anyway, he goes through the whole thing to basically conclude that yes, it is bullshit, because how are you going to measure the speed of the speed of light's 3 million meters per second? Your experiment can only move 50 miles an hour, so yes, you're kind of fucked. And you certainly can't know what its absolute speed is in the universe, quite obviously. These people who keep saying, well, we're going this fast, around the sun, and then we're going this fast through the galaxy and this fast through the universe. None of those motions are in the same direction. You can't just add them all up and saying, we're going 500,000 miles a second. No. Because those motions can be in completely the opposite direction, so you can't detect them anyway. But anyway, they still wouldn't be enough. You can't move matter fast enough to detect differences in minor distances. And the whole point is in the Michelson-Morley thing, they made up for the distance problem by creating a bunch of mirrors that are reflecting the light. And the problem with that is the mirrors end up lining up just as poorly. When you start turning it, you're turning these mirrors into the parallel as you're turning these mirrors into the same condition. So you're undoing by the two paths end up being affected just as much by the turning. Anyway, I think that's enough. There's no point in yammering on. It's like I said, if they're going to do this using the interferometer to do this, then they should do it with something like LIGO, where you actually have a 2-mile long path. It's really only see they always fool you. It's only they're 2 mile each. Each one is 2 miles. See, they count the back and forth. That's just cheating. But anyway, I can't remember. I've been over it so many times, I should remember by now. See, it's not even a whole number. It's like 2.2 miles or some kind of bullshit like that. Each leg round trip, I think, is 4 miles, but that might not be right. It sounds like too much to me. So if it's 2 miles and the whole thing is 4 miles, well, I don't know. It's not a terribly important fact, but I just forgot it. I knew it 4 weeks ago, but I don't remember it today. So anyway, I'm a bit tired. Not that I'm making excuses, but I am a bit tired. So anyway, so anyway, I just wanted to emphasize that there's something really wrong with this whole theory of the interferometer and the beam splitter. And I think I've demonstrated enough evidence to indicate that we're not being, when they tell us this is what's happening, that story isn't the story doing the experiment reveals. No need for 2 beams to intersect to create the pattern. Okay, so that's enough said. Till the next time and such.